It's a story that takes you through the 8 nights of Hanukkah. And, for me, when I wrote it, cooking and eating has always been a big part of Jewish holidays in my family. So I wanted the process of recipe planning and execution and tasting to play a leading part in the story. And my family also likes a little bit of competition, so I wanted to weave that in as well. So this is a story of a family whose grandmother traditionally makes the latkes for Hanukkah. And the mom and dad say, well, you always do so much for our family. Why don't we make them ourselves this year? And it turns into a competition, a little contest that they have, a cooking contest. And the little boy in the story, who's based on my son, is kind of moderating. And, he makes the winning ribbons and things like that. And I wanted to just show some of the playful and loving dynamics between family members. I wanted a story that didn't focus on gift giving. And so it takes place during Hanukkah, but I hope it's a book that can be enjoyed by families of all backgrounds. And I've heard from a number of families who don't celebrate Hanukkah that it's been a nice introduction for them.
You're listening to Lauren Ranalli, a children's book author from Ann Arbor, Michigan, discussing her latest writing project, The Great Latke Cook Off. She's our guest today on the podcast. Lauren, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Randy. Thanks for having me.
And how's the weather today out in Michigan?
Actually today it's bright and sunny, so I am quite happy.
Excellent. So, Lauren, before we get started, I just want to say thank you for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And how did you come up with the idea for the Great Latke Cook Off?
Well, my husband and I are an interfaith family. His family is Catholic and my family is Jewish. And when our first child was born, he has a December birthday. And so he received a lot of lovely Christmas books from family and friends as a gift when he was born. And so, while I was on maternity leave, I decided that I would go out and also get him some Hanukkah books just to sort of balance out our bookshelf a little bit. And I went out and I really couldn't find what I was looking for. I found that most of what's out there falls into sort of two ends of a spectrum. On one side, you had kind of like Elmo celebrates Hanukkah or Curious George celebrates Hanukkah. And then the other side, there was like the history of Hanukkah or the history of the Maccabees. And neither of which really resonated with me and with my own family traditions and cultural experiences. And a few months after I tried to go book shopping, I was driving to work and the story of the Great Latke Cook Off just sort of came to me. It like downloaded as an entire complete thought in my head during that 25-minute drive. And so I wrote it up and I sent it to myself as an email, but then I kind of sat on it for about 5 years until I actually had the time and capacity to turn it into a real book.
Yeah, it's always an interesting thing when stories come in and you get the full download.
Yeah, I found that actually with all of the books that I've written. So The Great Latke Cook Off was my first book, and I have 4 other manuscripts in the works. And each one of them has sort of had that same process where the title comes to me first, and then the story sort of plays out pretty automatically in my head. And I find that if I have to wrestle with a story too much, obviously there's editing and things that you're doing with a manuscript, but if the story doesn't come together for me pretty quickly, it doesn't feel like the right book for me.
That makes sense. So Lauren, growing up, were you always into creative writing or did it develop later on?
Yeah, I was always an avid reader and a writer. There's this wonderful quote from Emily Buchwald that children are made readers on the laps of their parents. And that was certainly true for me. I have very vivid early memories of reading with my mom and dad in a cozy chair in their room. And we would go to our local Ann Arbor District Library and, always pick out our favorites. I remember like Sylvester and the Magic Pebble and Stanley and Rhoda and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs were sort of on constant rotation in our house. And so having a regular opportunity to read or be read to was very meaningful for me. And my first real memory of writing was probably around age 7. My older sister and I wrote a book of poems for my parents as an anniversary gift. And after that, I always started keeping journals and which kind of served as like a regular writing exercise for me, even though I didn't think of it as that at the time. And so, this was something that I kept exploring. And, in college, I took a expository writing class that allowed me to respond to a wide variety of writing prompts, and you had to sit through a live critique from your peers in the class. So that was a really great lesson in sort of not getting too attached to any one particular piece of work, or if you do feel really strongly about something, then you really need to kind of dig in and make it better. And so that's just, I've been in book clubs for 15 years. I do volunteer reading to classrooms, and I'm also, I'm that person who recommends books to complete strangers in the grocery store and on the airplane and at daycare pickup and things like that.
Well, that's much appreciated out there on the airports and grocery stores.
Right. I don't know if it is, but I still do it.
And as a kid, did you have any authors that you particularly admired?
Oh gosh. I mean, I loved E.B. White. Gosh, the first sort of chapter book I remember reading to myself is Island of the Blue Dolphins. And I can't think of the author off the top of my head, actually, but that is one that I vividly remember sort of making me feel like, wow, I really want to read more. And so, yeah, those are some of the ones that sort of stick with me a little bit.
And tell me about your writing routine. I know you mentioned kind of getting in the car and having the downloads, but do you like coffee shops, quiet living rooms? How do you like to write?
So it's hard, so I have two young kids, and I have a non-writing job, my full-time work that I do. So fitting it in is pretty challenging, but I do like coffee shops, but I really prefer the my own home space. When it's nice here in Michigan, I like to write on my back porch. We recently moved our kids into a shared bedroom. They now have bunk beds and share a room. And that allowed me to create a home office, which has been really fantastic. I don't get to use it as much as I like, but I do prefer kind of writing in my home space. And I keep a notebook by the bed because my mind doesn't completely shut off the way I would like. And so there are some middle of the night ideas that I will jot down and look at in the morning, and some of them are okay, and some of them are really convoluted and terrible and clearly like mid-dream. And it's nice to just sort of have that nearby in case any gems come out of it.
Yep, that makes sense. So, Lauren, what inspires you to continue writing?
I love stories. I just love a good story. And I like to kind of look at the books that are out there that I enjoy, and also see like what isn't out there that I could maybe contribute to a little bit. And I've also found that being a self-published author, there's something like slightly addictive about it. You have the control over when and how your book gets put out there and who hears about it. And, once I sort of went through that process the first time, I thought, okay, like I can do this again, and I can, I can sort of set my own timetable. And so that's a nice thing for me. And I enjoy the marketing piece of it, telling people about the book, and not just my book, but highlighting other authors out there that I really enjoy. I firmly believe in sharing and showcasing diverse books and diverse authors. So having, a little bit of a platform to do that now is really exciting.
And it's really good to hear that you enjoy the marketing aspect, just because I know a lot of authors that they love to write, but marketing kind of is a little bit of a struggle.
It is. And, I've actually been working with a number of authors recently to kind of help them with that a little bit, and to help them sort of put together their social marketing platform, and just say, okay, let's think through for you, who is your target audience? What are some of the things that you enjoy? What are the colors and fonts that really speak to you and your brand? Because if you're an author, you have a brand. And so I've been doing work with a number of authors and other entrepreneurs recently to sort of help them get set up and ready to launch, or sort of ready to relaunch, I guess.
That's really great. So did you have any mentors that helped you along your writing journey?
Well, I'm still identifying some of those. Certainly, earlier on, I can recall teachers, all throughout high school who were really supportive. And definitely that course I took in college where you every week were submitting something new, and every week you were getting feedback from your peers, kind of face-to-face immediate feedback. And that was a really good experience for me. And now, I'm involved in, or I'm a member of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. I go to the meetups once a month in Ann Arbor, so you can kind of have like your own critique group there, or just sort of bounce ideas off of people. And I found this community of other self-published authors, either through Instagram or kind of just through some of my other work, where we share manuscripts now. And, these are people who are kind of going down the same journey, and we will bounce ideas, back and forth. The woman, Emily Sywick, who illustrated my first book, she's an author illustrator. And so she and I will trade manuscripts. And so that's been really exciting to sort of find those people and those peers.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the Great Latke Cook Off. Tell me about the premise of the book. What is it all about?
Sure. So it's a story that takes you through the 8 nights of Hanukkah. And, for me, when I wrote it, cooking and eating has always been a big part of Jewish holidays in my family. So I wanted the process of recipe planning and execution and tasting to play a leading part in the story. And my family also likes a little bit of competition, so I wanted to weave that in as well. So this is a story of a family whose grandmother traditionally makes the latkes for Hanukkah. And the mom and dad say, well, you always do so much for our family. Why don't we make them ourselves this year? And it turns into a competition, a little contest that they have, a cooking contest. And the little boy in the story, who's based on my son, is kind of moderating. And, he makes the winning ribbons and things like that. And I wanted to just show some of the playful and loving dynamics between family members. I wanted a story that didn't focus on gift giving. And so it takes place during Hanukkah, but I hope it's a book that can be enjoyed by families of all backgrounds. And I've heard from a number of families who don't celebrate Hanukkah that it's been a nice introduction for them.
That's really nice. And for those listeners who are not familiar with a latke, what is a latke exactly?
Oh, yeah. So a latke is like a potato pancake. So it's made out of potatoes and onions and flour and egg, and it becomes a batter, essentially, that you then fry in a pan in oil. And so it's kind of crispy on the outside and smushy on the inside. There are 2 schools of thought around what you eat with the latke. There is sort of the applesauce folks, and there are the sour cream people. And I am on team applesauce. I believe that latkes are eaten with applesauce. That's how we do it in my family. But I appreciate the diversity of opinion on this. And it's just a really yummy, kind of crispy treat. Although I will tell people that it will make your house smell like oil for a couple of days. So just be prepared.
Thanks for the warning. So is the applesauce a Midwestern thing, or is it evenly distributed throughout?
That is a good question. I do not know the data and the research on that. I mean, I do know people in the Midwest who will eat it with sour cream, but I think it's partly a personal preference, and I also just think it is a family tradition. Like, what you grow up eating is what you continue to eat and pass on to your family. I really don't know of anyone, now that I'm thinking about this for the first time, I've never heard somebody just say to me, I grew up eating eating latkes and applesauce, and as an adult, I switched to sour cream. I think it sort of becomes ingrained in you and like part of your holiday tradition.
That makes a lot of sense. So how would you describe your typical reader out there? What is their age group?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the book is really designed as a read aloud to children ages like 3 to 6, 3 to 7. Although I've certainly heard from families younger and older that they're enjoying the book. But I think that's pretty much the target audience. So it's meant to be read aloud and read as a family. The recipe is included in the back of the book, the winning recipe. So it's something that families can then enjoy together.
Wow, that's special.
Yeah.
Tell me about your illustrator.
Yeah, so Emily, she is another Ann Arbor mom, and she also does, she's an author and illustrator as a side project, a side passion. And I found her through the Ann Arbor Public Library, actually. They have a small printing press that publishes books about Ann Arbor. And she wrote a children's book called The Monster on Main Street, which is about a man in Ann Arbor who dresses up like a a wolf monster and plays the violin downtown. He's been around forever. And so she wrote a children's book about him and how to kind of introduce children to him and maybe make him seem a little less scary. And so I saw her book at the library, I really liked her illustrations. And so I kind of did, what anyone might do these days. And I Facebook stalked her, and I found her on Facebook, and turns out we had a friend in common. And I sent her a message and said, do you ever do any freelance illustration? And she said, I do. And so I reached out to her. We met for coffee to see if we might be a good team. It almost felt like going on a blind date, like I was like, are we going to be a good fit? Are we going to like each other? And we did. We got along right off the bat, and I gave her a copy of the manuscript, and she said she'd get back to me with some initial ideas. And a couple of days later, she sent me some sketches, and without ever having seen pictures of my family, she sketched an image of the grandpa that looked exactly like my dad. And I hired her on the spot. I was like, yep, I'm sold. Like, you nailed this. So then we started meeting every few weeks to work through the story page by page, and it's been a very easy collaboration. And she's going to be illustrating another one of my books for me. I think we're going to start working on it at the end of this year. It's called Places We Have Never Been. And we're hoping to put that one out in spring of 2020.
And that's really good to hear that you're supporting the local community. And
yeah. I mean, I will say, I didn't go with a local printer. I found a family-run printing press out in Colorado called Student Press that I've been really happy with. A lot of self-published authors go through online sources, which I think are great. They'll go through Ingram Spark or Create Space or something like that. But for me, I really wanted a real person that I could talk to, and the same person that I could talk to every time. And I'd heard very good things about Student Press, and I like being able to, just call or email Brandon and ask a question or say, okay, I'm ready to reorder, and know that, the shipping and the quality of everything is going to be really consistent.
So I do have one follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
The wolf monster that you mentioned, is this a real monster?
Yeah, this is a guy that he's a real person in Ann Arbor, and he is always on one of the corners on Main Street, playing his violin in a wolf monster mask, and he's been doing it for years.
Wow, that's
We live in a quirky town. I mean, Ann Arbor is it's a wonderful place. It just got rated again, I think, like the #2 city in Ann Arbor to live, and I absolutely love it. I grew up here. I love being here. It's a fun academic town, and it's really quirky.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you like readers to take away from your book?
I think what I want readers to take away from my book is a little bit of creative inspiration, and also some fond memories of family tradition, or some inspiration to start their own family tradition. I have heard from a number of readers across the country that they have now started their own holiday cooking contests. Whether or not they celebrate Hanukkah, they've sort of incorporated a little bit of a cooking competition, a friendly competition, into their holiday traditions. And I really love that.
Yep, it brings the family together, and you can follow the recipe in the back of the book.
Absolutely.
So Lauren, what advice would you give to the younger version of yourself who's just starting out as a writer?
Oh my gosh. Wow, that's a really good question. I think I would say to my younger self, keep ideas close by. I used to keep so many writing journals, and I can visualize this story I wrote in 6th grade about a machine that washes bubbles for a bubble bath. And I can't find that journal. And I remember that story, so there's pieces of it, and I want to recreate it because I really, really liked it. And so just don't get rid of your early stuff, keep things nearby. You never know what you might want to do with it. I'm definitely go back to my parents' house and try to find that journal, but I have a feeling it may have disappeared for good.
Are you still holding out hope a little bit?
A little bit.
Maybe someday it'll just pop out right in
Yeah.
front of you. So you mentioned another book that you're working on. What other projects are you currently working on?
Yeah, so I have 3 books that I'm working on right now. The next one that's coming out is called Snow Day at the Zoo, and I'm working with another local illustrator on that. We're actively in illustration mode, and that should hopefully be out in October of this year. And that is a story about zookeepers' children who, on the day when the zoo is closed for snow. And Places We Have Never Been is kind of an exercise that you can do with kids to explore places that you've never been, whether that's a few blocks away or whether it's across a distant ocean, and you pick a place in your mind that you've never been to, and it takes you through a series of reading prompts. Think about things like, what's the weather like today in the place you've never been? And if you were hungry, what would you eat for a snack? And I did this with my kids a couple weeks ago, and my son picked China and my daughter picked the moon. And it was really fun to see them kind of come up with these ideas of, what would it smell like on the moon, and things like that. So I'm really excited about that book. And then my husband and I are working on a book together. He is a creative director and graphic designer. And he came up with a story concept called Tap Dance Ninja. So that's one that we are working on together that I think will hopefully be out in a couple of years. And outside of books, I'm doing some guest blogging. I'm doing some other writing. And I'm, as I said, I'm working with other authors or creators or entrepreneurs on their social media presence and engagement.
Excellent.
And then I have my full-time job as a public health professional. So lots of stuff packed in.
Yeah, sounds like it. And yeah, that exercise where you describe being on the moon and describing, what does it smell like, sort of thing. That sounds like it's a real imagination opener for kids.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that one. I can't wait to sort of get the illustration going. Emily, who illustrated the Great Latke Cook Off, is going to be working on that, and her illustration style, I think, is going to be perfect for it. It's kind of a little whimsical, and I think it's going to be really great.
And Lauren, where can listeners find your books?
So the most common place that people find me is just on my website, which is laurenranalli.com. I'm also on Instagram at lauren.ranalli_author. And I'm in a few local bookstores here. I did just recently put the book on Amazon, so it's available there as well. And I'm hoping to be expanding to some other platforms this fall.
And we've also got your website linked up on the Creative Writing Magic website and our Twitter feed.
Thank you.
So Lauren, before we close the show, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I guess I would say, if you are starting, to write or starting to think about publishing, really just kind of finding your people who are doing the same thing and reaching out and connecting. I think that has been so valuable for me. And this community of writers is so gracious with their time and their expertise. I don't think that people feel really proprietary about their experience trying to find, whether it's an illustrator or building a website or looking for a publisher or whatever it is. People are very open to helping others not make the same mistakes or kind of go through the same stumbling blocks, because there's so much that you have to figure out. And so even just telling people, you don't always have to buy the barcode for the ISBN. Your publisher, your printer should be able to just do that for you. Like little tiny tips that will help save you time and money along the way. So I just encourage people to reach out to me or to others and not try to do this in a vacuum.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely remember buying my first ISBN number, and that was certainly a little adventure.
It was. And then they're like, do you want the barcode? And you're like, sure, I need a barcode. And then I realized that my printer could just make the barcode. So.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's all the time we have for today. Lauren, thanks so much for being a guest on the show.
Thank you so much, Randy. It was fun.
And thank you, listener. You make this all possible. If you like this podcast, feel free to support us on Patreon and consider subscribing. The link to Patreon is in the description. Also, if you're an aspiring writer and would like to learn more about writing coaching services, contact us on the Creative Writing Magic website. And also, be sure to subscribe to the email newsletter to receive email notifications when new episodes are available. And as always, thanks so much for listening. Stay inquisitive, support the arts, and keep creating. Bye for now.